A voicemail arrived before dawn, not to the police, not to Nancy's husband, but to a woman who hadn't spoken to her in almost 7 years. At first it sounded like static, soft breathing, fabric rubbing against a microphone. Then Nancy's voice came through, trembling so badly it barely sounded human. "I think I made a mistake." And then something else, a man in the background whispering her name, not angrily, not loudly, just calmly enough to make your stomach drop. The voicemail ended with what investigators later described as a sharp metallic sound, followed by silence. No scream, no struggle, just silence so complete it felt deliberate. By the time police traced the call, Nancy Guthrie had already been missing for 100 days. And the strangest part, the reward money had doubled twice. National media had picked up the case. Volunteers searched forests, rivers, abandoned homes, but somehow, every lead only made the story darker. Nancy Guthrie was the kind of person people described with careful words: quiet, reliable, gentle. She worked part-time at a bookstore near the edge of town and spent most evenings at home with her golden retriever Oliver. Neighbors said her porch light was always on before sunset. Her curtains were always drawn at the same hour. She lived a life so routine that when she suddenly vanished, it felt less like a disappearance and more like reality itself had shifted. Sideways. The last confirmed sighting came from a grainy convenience store camera. Nancy stood near the register holding a bottle of water and a pack of aspirin. She looked exhausted, nervous. Even several times during the footage, she glanced toward the parking lot as if checking whether someone had followed her there. Then, right before leaving, she leaned toward the cashier and asked a strange question. "Has anyone been asking about me?" The cashier laughed awkwardly and said no. Nancy didn't smile back. When she failed to show up for work the next morning, her manager assumed she was sick. But by the second day, concern turned into panic. Nancy never ignored calls, never disappeared. Police entered her home expecting signs of a rushed exit, but what they found was far stranger. Her purse sat neatly beside the kitchen sink, her car keys hung on their usual hook. Oliver had been left alone inside the house, hungry and scratching at the back door. The only thing missing was Nancy herself and her cell phone. Investigators discovered fresh mud tracked across the laundry room floor, though no rain had fallen for days. One detective later admitted something about the scene unsettled him immediately. "It looked staged," he said, "like somebody wanted the house to feel normal." Yet no fingerprints besides Nancy's were found anywhere inside. The case exploded online after local news released the convenience store footage. Amateur detectives slowed the video frame by frame, obsessing over every reflection in the windows behind Nancy. And eventually, people noticed something chilling. Parked across the street sat a dark-colored sedan with its headlights off. In 3 separate frames, the vehicle appeared slightly closer each time, as though inching forward while Nancy stood inside the store. Police traced dozens of similar vehicles with no results. Meanwhile, Nancy's sister revealed something investigators had not shared publicly. Weeks before disappearing, Nancy had complained that someone was watching her house at night. She described hearing footsteps outside her bedroom window and finding cigarette butts near her porch even though nobody in the family smoked. Officers initially dismissed it as paranoia, but after the disappearance, those reports suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Then came the first real break. A hiker discovered Nancy's phone near a shallow creek miles outside town. The screen was shattered, waterlogged beyond repair, but the SIM card survived. Technicians recovered fragments of deleted messages, including one sent only hours before Nancy vanished. It contained no text, just a blurry photograph taken through a windshield at first. The image seemed meaningless. Trees, darkness, rain on glass, but hidden in the corner was part of a road sign. Detectives identified the location as an isolated service road near an abandoned mining property. Search teams rushed the area expecting the worst. Instead, they found something even more disturbing. Fresh tire tracks, empty food wrappers, and evidence someone had been living there recently, but had left in a hurry. As the investigation dragged into its second month, public sympathy turned into obsession. Flyers covered gas stations across 3 counties. A private donor offered a reward large enough to change someone's life overnight. Tips flooded in by the hundreds. Most were useless. Some were cruel, but one call stood out from the rest. A truck driver claimed he picked up a frightened woman matching Nancy's description near the state line. He said she begged to use his phone but panicked when he asked questions. According to him, she kept repeating one sentence under her breath. He said nobody would believe me. Before police could fully verify the story, the truck driver disappeared from public view. He refused interviews and stopped cooperating entirely. Detectives eventually uncovered a detail Nancy had hidden from almost everyone. A year before vanishing, she had briefly dated a man named Daniel Harlow. Frenzy described him as charming at first but deeply controlling behind closed doors. Nancy ended the relationship suddenly and never explained why. Daniel, meanwhile, insisted they had remained friends. He volunteered for search efforts, gave emotional interviews, even cried on camera while pleading for Nancy to come home. But investigators noticed inconsistencies. Daniel claimed he hadn't seen Nancy in months, yet traffic cameras captured his truck near her neighborhood days before she vanished. When confronted, he brushed it off casually, said he was just driving around. The explanation felt thin, but there still wasn't enough evidence to charge him with anything, and every time police closed in, another lead pulled them somewhere else. By day 90, the case was falling apart. Search crews scaled back. News stations stopped covering updates. Even the hotlines slowed to almost nothing. Then the voicemail surfaced. The one with Nancy whispering, "I think I made a mistake." Investigators traced the call to a prepaid phone purchased with cash less than an hour earlier. Audio experts enhanced the background noise and discovered something horrifying hidden beneath the static. Water dripping, a rhythmic metallic clang, and faintly, train horns in the distance. Detectives focused on abandoned industrial zones near old rail lines, convinced Nancy might still be alive. For the first time in weeks, hope returned. Fragile, desperate hope. The major twist came from a retired detective who had quietly followed the case from home. He recognized the metallic sound from the voicemail immediately. It wasn't random. It was a specific type of chain pulley used in old freight elevators. Only a handful still existed in the county. One location matched perfectly: a condemned textile warehouse scheduled for demolition. Police entered the building expecting to find Nancy. Instead, they found evidence of surveillance, hundreds of photographs pinned across dusty walls. Nancy sleeping, Nancy grocery shopping, Nancy inside her own home, photographed through windows she believed were covered. And in the center of the room sat a folding chair facing an old cassette recorder. Inside the recorder was another message from Nancy, but this time she sounded calm. Too calm. "If anyone finds this," she said softly, "he's going to say I was unstable. Don't let him do that again." The warehouse evidence finally gave detectives probable cause to arrest Daniel Harlow. But when officers arrived at his property, he was gone. His house looked abandoned. In a rush, half-eaten food sat rotting on the counter. A television still played static in the living room. And in the garage, investigators discovered something hidden beneath a tarp: Nancy's missing porch light. Forensic teams made another devastating discovery inside Daniel's basement. Audio recordings, dozens of them. Hours and hours of secretly recorded conversations with Nancy stretching back months before her disappearance. In several recordings, Nancy accused Daniel of following her, manipulating her, breaking into her house. But the final tape changed everything. Nancy's voice cracked as she whispered, "You said if I told anyone what happened to your wife, you'd do the same thing to me." Daniel Harlow had a wife once. Her death had been ruled an accident nearly 8 years earlier after she supposedly fell from a hiking trail during heavy fog. Investigators reopened the case immediately, and buried deep in old files was a statement nobody paid attention to back then. Nancy Guthrie had been the last person to see Daniel's wife alive. The full truth emerged slowly, piece by piece. Nancy had discovered Daniel killed his wife during an argument and staged the death as an accident. He manipulated Nancy into silence, then later began dating her to keep control over what she knew. When Nancy finally tried to leave and threatened to go to police, Daniel began stalking her, watching her, isolating her. On the 100th day of her disappearance, Authorities found Nancy buried beneath the concrete floor of the condemned warehouse, hidden only feet away from the room covered in her photographs. Daniel Harlow was captured weeks later in another state after attempting to take his own life during a traffic stop. He confessed to everything except one detail. He never explained why he kept Nancy's porch light. And maybe that's the worst part, because somewhere in that dark warehouse, for 100 days, he wanted her to feel like home was still waiting for her.